This is not a video about Iran, and it is not a video about the United States. This is a video about a deeper paradox of power. Why can the strongest force in history win a war, and yet be unable to end it? We tend to think of war in terms of strength, more weapons, more intelligence, more alliances. But that model is outdated, because in modern geopolitics, war is not decided by force. It is decided by something far more restrictive: cost and the ability to control what comes after. Let me put it plainly. The United States does not refrain from eliminating Iran because it is weak. It refrains because the system that follows victory is more dangerous than the enemy itself. This is the first illusion we must break. Military victory is not the same as strategic victory. History already demonstrated this in the Iraq War. The regime fell, the army collapsed. But what followed was not stability. It was fragmentation, civil war, radicalization. In other words, the United States won the war and lost the future. And once a great power learns that lesson, it does not forget. Now consider the second constraint. War is fought abroad, but its consequences are paid at home. In democratic systems, wars are not sustained by military capacity alone. They're sustained by public tolerance. Fatigue accumulates, budgets stretch, political divisions widen, and eventually war stops being a foreign policy issue. It becomes a domestic liability. But perhaps the most dangerous misunderstanding is to see Iran as an isolated actor. Iran is not a country in the traditional sense. It is a network, a system of influence that stretches across multiple fronts: Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen. To strike Iran is not to start a war. It is to trigger a chain reaction, a multi-front conflict that expands faster than it can be controlled. And then there is the global layer. Consider the Strait of Hormuz. A disruption here is not regional. It is systemic. Oil prices surge. Supply chains fracture. Financial markets destabilize. At that moment, war is no longer a national decision. It becomes a global crisis, and the cost is no longer measurable. This brings us to the core structure of deterrence. Iran can inflict damage. The United States can overwhelm militarily. Both sides possess the capacity to hurt the other in unacceptable ways. So the system stabilizes itself around a paradox. Victory is possible, but survival is not guaranteed. That is deterrence. Not peace, but controlled tension. And here we encounter something deeply human. Political leaders are drawn to the idea of total victory, complete control, final resolution. But reality imposes a different logic. Total victory requires occupation. Occupation requires time. Time creates political cost. So the objective quietly shifts from ending the conflict to managing it. There is an ancient insight that captures this perfectly. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there is a simple but profound idea. Attachment prolongs suffering. Apply this to geopolitics, and the meaning becomes clear. The more a nation seeks absolute control, the more instability it creates. And so unconsciously, perhaps, strategy evolves, not toward destruction, but toward containment. Now let us move from structure to scenario. What happens if conflict actually begins? In the short term, days, perhaps weeks. What we observe is not order, but shock. Triggers could include targeted assassinations, large-scale airstrikes, attempts to close critical choke points. The response would be immediate and excessive. Precision strikes, cyber warfare, missile barrages, and markets faster than governments would react instantly. Energy spikes, equities fall, capital flees to safety. At that point, the war has already escaped its borders. In the medium term, the pattern shifts. War expands, not through direct confrontation, but through proxies. The battlefield multiplies, and strategy adjusts. Direct engagement becomes costly. Indirect pressure becomes preferable. Why? Because the objective is no longer victory. It is cost management. But the most revealing phase is the long term. When a war lasts beyond a year, something fundamental changes. Clarity disappears. There is no decisive winner, only persistent tension. War stops being an event. It becomes a condition. Inside Iran, external pressure does not guarantee collapse, because systems do not fall on pressure alone. They fall when internal cohesion breaks. And Iran maintains cohesion through three powerful mechanisms: religious legitimacy, narratives of martyrdom, and the framing of external enemies. These are not military tools. They are psychological anchors. At the same time, the population exists in a dual reality. Publicly, there is compliance. Privately, there is doubt. This is not hypocrisy. It is survival, a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance, combined with self-preservation. And within this structure, another force operates silently. The majority remains quiet. The minority appears dominant. This is what social psychology calls the spiral of silence. And beneath all ideology, there is something even more fundamental: survival, inflation, unemployment, sanctions. These pressures outweigh abstract beliefs. So the system persists, not because it is loved, but because it is endured. Now we arrive at an uncomfortable truth. War is not always irrational. Under certain conditions, it becomes the most rational option available, especially in systems where only the extreme can survive, where moderation is filtered out, where escalation reinforces itself. And so we must ask the final questions. Why do people not revolt? Why do systems endure under pressure? And if they collapse, does something better truly emerge? History offers a warning. Collapse is not liberation. It is transition. And transition is the most dangerous phase of all, because between order and order, there is chaos. So here is the conclusion. The world is not governed by those who are strongest. It is governed by those who cannot afford to retreat. And at the center of that structure are three forces: fear, meaning, identity. Modern war is not about winning. It is about stopping at a level you can survive. And this is why even the most powerful nations do not seek to end certain conflicts. They seek to manage them. If this perspective challenged your assumptions, consider subscribing, sharing, and continuing this exploration, because understanding the structure is the only way to understand the outcome. And sometimes the difference between order and chaos is not power, but restraint.